Okay, we will start. See, now onwards, when we discuss the theory questions, you will see or you will understand that all these actually we have done the discussion. Either we have discussed it in the class initial, the theory sessions, or we might have discussed it in the question paper discussion, right? We have solved 2020, 2019, 18, 17, and 16. So 4-year question papers and close to 48, 50 questions we have seen from theory, right? And maybe 30, 40 case studies also we have seen. So that it will be repetition. And one good thing in ethics, you can see it will be always repetition. Okay, so you will understand all these questions. These are simply repetition and also things which we have already discussed. For example, the first question, if you see, what is meant by environmental ethics? I don't think that I need to discuss at this point of time here. We have discussed this in a question paper and we have discussed this when we discussed about the theory part also. Why is it important to study? Maybe this one I may need to discuss, but again, this is very subjective. If you understood what is environmental ethics, this is something which you need to write. Discuss any one of environmental issue from the viewpoint of environmental ethics. Okay, so what is this environmental ethics? It is the ethical relationship between the human beings and environment, right? How we are using environment or how we are exploiting environment, it will come in along with sustainable development concepts and everything, right? So these debates again will come there. Growth versus development, development versus sustainable development. So all these we have discussed. So, and we have also discussed from the perspective of Mahatma Gandhi also, that earth have everything to take care of the needs of the people, but not the greed of the people, right? So environmental ethics, I hope this is something which you can answer. It is a ethics which concerns human beings relationship with the environment, how we are using it, how morally we are using it. So every individual has some moral responsibility to protect the environment, right? So trusteeship approach, we are just a caretaker and it has to be passed on to the next generation also. So we have, and why it is important? It is important because again you can talk about the trusteeship approach. It is something which has to be passed on to the next generation, and sustainable use is required. So you can make people aware about all these things. So for awareness creation, this is important, right? Otherwise, again, to ensure that the people are morally responsible to protect environment. And you can also talk about fundamental duty and various environmental conferences, right? And you can also talk about Mahatma Gandhi's statement here. We have discussed this. So caretaker approach. Okay, so ultimately, why is it important? If you ask me, if you have knowledge about this, it will actually, you can say it may promote sustainable use of it or a judicious use of resources. For example, water or anything, there will be a proper use of this will happen, right? Now, what are the examples? So they are talking about the environmental issues. So you can talk about pollution, you can talk about global warming, you can talk about greenhouse effect or anything you can talk about. And you can also talk about the polluter pay principles. We have discussed this in the previous questions. Polluter pay principle, common but differentiated responsibility. Okay, so different countries. So it is almost similar to polluter pay. Historically, those who are responsible for the pollution, they have the differential responsibility. What is a common responsibility? Sustainable development, and environment has to be protected. Okay, so differentiated responsibility and all these, this various environmental conferences, UNFCCC and everything, maybe you can mention here. But this is something which is direct and straightforward. All these we have discussed many times. I have discussed about this law and ethics. And if you remember, most of the time I use this legal and ethical. What we need is maximum overlap. So if you ask me what is the difference, ethics means what? It is basically based on some moral principles, right? So moral principles, that is guiding us, right, from within. So you can say it is more or less connected to conscience and it is internal. It comes from within. Or when it comes to law, it is certain rules and regulations, right? And that is imposed on us and we have to follow that. So there will be punishments and penalties if it is violated, but that's not the case with ethics. So that is how you can differentiate and understand here. This is of 10 mark, 4 questions are there. What you need is 2.5 mark. So 2.5 mark means hardly 40 words is what you need to write. But I am explaining this from the perspective of 10 marker. In case if you, this can be asked as a 10 marker also. Okay, so what we need here, there are certain cases which may be legal but not ethical. So this part, if you see, it is ethical but not legal. This is legal but not ethical. What we need is maximum overlap between this. I have given you enough examples in the previous sessions. If you talk about civil disobedience movement of Mahatma Gandhi, okay, that is civil disobedience movement. What is that meaning itself? Violating a law. That is when it becomes civil disobedience movement. Okay, so if you see Champaran Satyagraha, the first civil disobedience movement, Mahatma Gandhi gave a call not to pay tax. So not to pay tax, that is not legal, but in that context, it is ethical. And if you remember, I have multiple times told you that when Mahatma Gandhi was produced in front of the magistrate, he said something like that: "It is my highest moral responsibility as a citizen of India, even though it may be illegal, but I go for it." And he accepted complete responsibility of all those issues. Okay, so and various other examples which you can write here. You can talk about euthanasia, you can talk about afspa. Okay, these are legal but not ethical. Euthanasia, not in our country, but some countries it is accepted. So but it is not ethical, right? Marital rape, okay, legal but not ethical. And also capital punishment, it is legal but not ethical. It is like eye for an eye will make the entire world blind. Okay, so these are examples which you can write here if the question is asked for 10 marker. Otherwise, just write the definition what I've told you. This is based on certain rules and regulations, and this is some guiding behavior. These are moral principles, right? So here there won't be any penalties. Here there will be penalties or punishments, sanctions. Okay, and this is imposed from outside. There are regulatory bodies for that, but this is something which is based on the conscience and something which is internal. Okay, what about ethical management and management of ethics? Ethical management means the management is following the ethical principles, right? It is basically the corporate management that not only fulfills the economic goal. Anyway, for the corporate, the companies, whatever it is, MNCs, there will be economic goals. So that is important, economic goals. But at the same time, the legal responsibility, the social responsibility also taken care, right? Maybe in terms of CSR and various other initiatives. So that is what ethical management. Management of ethics means what? That word itself will tell you managing ethics in the ethics and values in that organization. It can be through some internal processes like code of conduct, etc. Okay, so that is the direct, very simple answer. There is nothing to study here. Now, discrimination and preferential treatment, that we have discussed before about preferential treatment, reservation. So discrimination means, when we discuss about discrimination, this is having a negative connotation, but this is positive, and this is allowed, this is not allowed. You can talk about example caste based discrimination, right? So like untouchability and everything, that is banned by constitution, abolished by constitution. Whereas reservation, for the upliftment of the backward people, that is what preferential treatment, right? So I've discussed with you that unequals to be treated unequally, that is also ethical principles. Equals to be treated equally, at the same time unequal to be treated unequally, and that is the entire concept behind this preferential treatment. Brahmins versus Dalits, completely unequal in terms of their life chances, privileges, avenues and everything. So they should not be treated equally. That is the reason why preferential treatment is required for the Dalits, to uplift them. Okay, and that is what we are understanding as preferential treatment, and this is positive. But when we say discrimination, this is negative, right? Like untouchability and everything, this is banned by the constitution, but this is accepted by the constitution. Okay, now what about personal ethics and professional ethics? Again, many case studies we have discussed about this, and I have told you this will lead to conflict of interest also, right? Personal issues like organizational issue. You are working somewhere, and your conscience says something different. So cognitive dissonance. We have discussed about that IT professional case. We have discussed about many case with respect to this. Either personal ethics versus professional ethics, or we have seen organizational ethics versus professional ethics, organizational ethics versus public interest, right? All these we have discussed. What is this? This, when we discuss about personal ethics, that deals with the ethics in personal life. What about this? It is at the workplace, like code of conduct, etc. Okay, what are the examples? If you see personal ethics, it's like always be honest, always tell the truth, okay, no stealing, etc. Compassion, love, care, all these are personal ethics. Professional ethics means follow the procedures. There will be standard operating procedures that you have to follow. The devotion to duty, commitment, and all these are what you can write as the professional ethics. Mainly code of conduct and the conduct rules, the rules, okay, the procedures. Any doubts here? So that's about the first two questions. Okay, straightforward question. Statements. This is something which you need to interpret. You cannot study and go. Whatever ethical knowledge you have, based on that, you should be in a position to answer this question. Okay, so the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of strong. So what you need to discuss here is, see, this is the statement which is given by Mahatma Gandhi. It doesn't matter whether you know the person who gave the statement or not. Maybe, definitely, you may not come to know about this. So it's not important. You just need to understand the statement, and based on that, you should be in a position to answer this. Okay, so here they're actually talking about, let's talk about the example of anger. Anger is a feeling and something which can be controlled by only strong people, right? You need emotional intelligence for that. So we have discussed about anger in the sessions. We have discussed about emotional intelligence, how the anger can be controlled. I've given you the examples and everything. So that is what you need to write here. So if you need to see, getting angry and explode and take action based on that anger, it is something which the weak people will do. But forgiveness is something, and the strong people can do. That means they have to control the anger, and to control the anger, that kind of feeling, you need extreme amount of emotional intelligence, right? And it is very necessary also. Okay, so they're also asking about what it means to you in the present context. So you can write any examples, like but the problem with forgiveness is sometimes this may be taken as a weakness, but you can make sure that this is not to be treated as weakness. It is not weakness. There are some cases which has to be treated in a very stern and strong way, like in case of cross border terrorism. That kind of activities has to be treated very strongly, and maximum punishment should be given. That examples you can give. Okay, this is again a statement which you need to explain with your imagination. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. Okay, here afraid of the dark means without any knowledge, like an innocent person. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Like if you are ignorant person, you know something, but you're not revealing that, you're not telling the truth, you're hiding it, and that is against transparency and all this, that you can explain. Okay, so third question. A mere compliance with law is not enough. The public servant also have to have a well developed sensibility to ethical issues for effective discharge of duties. Do you agree? Obviously you will agree with this, right? Just following the law is not enough, right? This is something which will not make you a sensitive civil servant. It will not be a democratic approach. You may be a typical bureaucrat just by following the rule of law, procedure established by law, but that sensibility and sensitivity and the compassion, that empathy components is not there. Then you cannot say effective discharge of duty cannot be performed properly. Explain with the help of two examples. Two examples you have to give where an act is ethically right but not legally. An act is legally right but not ethically. Okay, see, if you remember one of the case study that we have seen, the old woman, that destitute that is coming to you, okay, and she's having some problem with the documents. If you remember yesterday we have discussed that some problem with the documents. So the government is running a scheme that for the widow or the old and destitute, and to avail that scheme, she is clearly deserving, and you have understood after an inquiry that she's deserving, but the problem is she don't have the mandatory requirement. So in this case you can give that example here. Act is ethically right, you're doing something, you are helping her, but that is not legally right because you are violating some procedures, right? Because as per the procedure, as per the rules, you have to follow strictly. So you may compromise on there, but the reason why you are compromising is you clearly know that she deserve it. So it is ethically right because you are done it with a good intention, and you are not going to get any benefit out of it, and it is because of compassion and your sensibility towards that old age person and the vulnerable section, you're doing that. So that is an example which you can give here. At the same time, act is legally right but not ethically. For example, you're a police officer, okay, you are you are going to catch a criminal. So you have two options: you can kill, and you can shoot at sight, and you can also, you can make some false stories, or in another way I can put that in this way: fake encounter. You can do encounter, you can come out of it very easily by saying many reasons, like it is for self defense, they try to attack you, many reasons you can say. That is one option. Arrest him and produce in front of magistrate and go with the proper legal way. So okay, so legally you killing that person may be correct, because if it is done for self defense, if you can prove that it is self defense, then legally it is correct, right? But that is not ethically correct. Then this part I hope you can explain with the theoretical knowledge that you already have, like empathy, responsiveness, compassion, selflessness. All these are the values, foundational values, which is required for the civil servant. That is required. That makes the civil servant responsible and responsive with the public. Okay, so here also you need to draw that diagram that we have discussed here. I've told you that this one, what we need is overlap, right? Legal and ethical, what we need is maximum overlap. So here they are asking the same thing only. You can see here, an act is ethically right, that means it will come here, but not legally right. And the second one they're talking about legally right, that means it will come here, but not ethically. So you have enough examples which I've given you from the previous sessions and even in the first question of today. But at the same time, this example which I've given to you, that is directly from the case study which we have discussed yesterday. So that is the reason why I've given you legally right but not ethically. Even this of spa that we have discussed, okay, capital punishment, all these in general. But as a public servant, you can write this example. As a police officer, something which you can do within your domain, the power that you have, that you can use legally, it may be correct but not ethically. Okay, next one, we have discussed about these virtues already. Trustworthiness. How do the virtues of trustworthiness and fortitude, courage, get manifested in public service? Explain with examples. So a public servant definitely need to be trustworthy, and we have discussed about honesty, integrity, and all these things. So that you need to explain how it get manifested in public service. That is something which you can easily explain. Fortitude, right? There are certain actions, if you need to do that, you need courage. For example, even before, we have discussed about some case study of a minister who's forcing you to divert the road through his land so that the real estate, the land price will increase. So all those things, but you're denying there, and for that you need courage. So that is how you can you can explain that. And certain decisions that you're going to take, if it is in the public interest, and you need courage to take that decision, right? For example, there's demonetization. If you need to implement that, that level of courage and commitment is actually required. Explain this. What is this virtue we have discussed? This also we have discussed. Explain what is this to, and how is it manifested, and how is it getting benefited, right? It will ensure justice, right? It will ensure transparency, accountability. It shows integrity, and selflessness. Okay, if you need to work selfless, you need courage, commitment. Okay, so these are the good things that you can write. Examples also, the one which we have discussed now, also you can write. See, the idea is, I just want to tell you, we are familiar with all these. Now you should not be facing any problem, or you should not be surprised when you see the question paper. That's the only objective. That is the reason why I'm taking all these questions and we are discussing, so that you will be confident that we have done with all these. The theory part is done. Now it's only about refreshing that knowledge and reading more and more and more from the chronicle itself. What I need you to do is understand each and every word which is written in chronicle, whether we have covered or not. Whatever is there in the syllabus we have covered, but we need to understand, sometimes if they can randomly ask something, you should be in a position to write it. At the same time, in a case study or in any this kind of quotations if they are giving, you should be in a position to write some good words like this cognitive dissonance, right, etc., in your answers. So read that properly. There is no need to go for too much of books for this particular subject, and stick to one. Read multiple times, have an idea about each and every term which is written over there. Okay, so next one, fourth one. They're talking about the social values are more important than economic values. Discuss above statement with examples in the context of inclusive growth of nation. See, we don't want to say that one is superior over the other. Obviously, economic values is also required. Both will go hand in hand. So economic values is also important for the development. At the same time, social values are required, right? So what are the social values when we talk about general things that we have discussed? Compassion, empathy, love, the brotherhood, right? Togetherness, all these. And economic values means the economic ethics, economic policies, or the company's policies, normal situation. Both are important, right? If the company need to grow, this is important, but at the same time, this also is to be followed. So it's actually intertwined, both are interlinked, both are equally important, right? So, and company can benefit from this economic values, and then through CSR you can spend for social values also. So the company as well as the society will get benefit out of it. Inclusive growth. Okay, this also we have discussed multiple times. If you see, we have discussed this when we discussed about the theory, and we have seen this question also related to RTI. Every year you can see one question related to RTI. Some recent developments such as introduction of RTI. Okay, not that. Sorry. Introduction of RTI Act, media, judicial activism are proving helpful in bringing about greater transparency and accountability in the functioning of the government. However, it is also being observed that at times the machines are, yeah, it is the same only. We have discussed about RTI Act, how it is misused. Okay, that we have already done. Media, how is it is misused, you need to discuss because of this yellow journalism, the threatening, right, the blackmailing, and this unethical journalism, the media trial. Media being the fourth pillar have to have that kind of responsibility, but within media there are competition, and within that also corruption, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and all these issues you can highlight. Judicial activism, you see, the problem with this is there is a clear cut separation of power, and nowadays it is more than judicial activism, it is like a judicial overreach, so beyond the power, right? So that is also something which you need to discuss from your knowledge. Okay, now another negative effect is that the officers are now afraid to take prompt decision. Because of this RTI itself, we have discussed why officers are not ready to take decision. Even the honest officers are also getting trapped. They are afraid of this RTA and this transparency laws. Analyze the situation in detail and suggest how the dichotomy can be resolved. So we have already discussed about how can you solve this problem. You can create a list of such kind of RTA activists, and you can impose fines. You can put them in, you can put a black mark on those kind of activists. So a back testing can be done, the kind of RTIs. Suggest how these negative impacts can be minimized. So take one by one. When you take RTI, I've discussed media also, what can be done, introduce ethics. Okay, so proper regulatory mechanism within that media can be there to take care of media, and proper ethical code of conduct and everything you can discuss over there. Similarly, judicial activism also. Okay, so I hope you understood about this judicial activism. This we haven't seen so far in our ethics paper. Mainly, you will get this in your polity and governance paper too only. But here we can discuss that it goes against the principles of separation of powers, right? And this public interest litigations are actually misused these days, and the court is also uh, drawn into some political issues unnecessarily, right? The special leave petitions, the PIL, and all these are misused, and it is also affecting the that is also affecting the decision makings, right? That is also getting affected. Now, what are the solutions? What you can say is, we have discussed about this. There should be some mechanisms to protect the honest officers, right? So that, like, a prior sanction is required to protect the honest officers. That is something which you can write. And this bona fide cases, if something done with dishonest intention, then there has to be punishment, but otherwise it has to be taken care. Okay, also you need to empower the officers to take decisions without favor, right, without fear, etc. And then implement code of conduct, code of ethics. These are suggestions which you can give to minimize these negative impacts. And how to solve the problem of this RTI activist and all that we have discussed, that this black mark and some fines can be imposed, right? So, and media, with respect to media and judiciary, you can say that media and judiciary should be sensitized with respect to this issue. Media being the fourth pillar of this democracy, they have to be more responsible and responsive. Now they are responsive, but they are not responsible. Okay, unethical journalism. All these are issues which we need to address. Okay, so next one, two different kinds of attitudes exhibited by public servants towards their work have been identified as bureaucratic attitude. So I hope you can understand, when I say bureaucratic attitude means what? You are strictly following the rules and regulations. You're showing that strict adherence to the procedures and the rule of law. That's what you mean by bureaucratic attitude. That means you are sticking to the books, rule books, and the procedures. Like, you believe in the infallibility of what? Rule book, right? You completely follow that. Democratic attitude means sometimes you may violate law, but that is for the larger public interest, right? Because you assume that people are the source of power. So you have to do something for the public, and any problem public is facing, even though it may be against rule of the rule book, but you have to do something good for the people. So that is about this democratic attitude. You can say this is top down approach, and this is a bottom up down, this top down approach. This is bottom up approach. Okay, so what are the merits and demerits? See, obviously, this is something which you need to write directly. Is very easy only. So first of all, the bureaucrat has to follow the procedures, right? It gives the clarity. It gives the clarity regarding the roles. It will increase transparency. It is actually to increase transparency and increase accountability and to increase efficiency. These rules and the hierarchies and everything is there. So that has to be followed, and that is the merit you can write with respect to bureaucratic attitude. The advantages, right? So it ensures transparency, it reduces corruption, it reduces favoritism, it increases accountability, it increases efficiency. All these are advantages of bureaucratic attitude. But the problem, what is the demerit of that? It lacks that human touch, the compassion, that empathy. That component is missing. That ethical component is missing. When it comes to democratic attitude, what are the merits and demerits? It's a good approach, people-centric approach, and taking care of the needs of the people. But accountability may come down. You may take decisions just like that. So the question is, the accountability may come down. So there is one more part. Is it possible to balance the two? So that you can answer by saying, bring some code of ethics, right? Sensitizing people, that is sensitizing not only people, the civil servants also. Okay, and promote this innovative measures, out of the box thinking. So what we need is, actually, you should not stick to completely bureaucratic attitude or completely democratic attitude. There are advantages here, there are advantages here. Okay, so what we need, as we have discussed before, we need to go for golden mean. Aristotle principle, we have discussed golden mean. So between these two, that means what you need to take from here, follow the rules and procedures. What you need to take from here has to be sensitive towards the people. Now, don't you think that this is almost a similar question that they have asked here? Almost a similar question. Almost similar question again. Today, we find that in spite of various measures of prescribing code of conduct, setting up vigilance cells, commissions, RTI, active media, strengthening of legal mechanisms, corrupt practices are not coming under control. So this is related to corruption. How to evaluate the effectiveness of these measures with justification. So you need to evaluate all these. What is the problem with RTA? We have discussed this. I'm not going to discuss that. Vigilance cells and commission. What is the problem with vigilance cells and commission? Actually, they lack this power. They don't have much power. They need sanctions from the government. Okay, and in all these ways, they also are actually tied. So their hands are also tied. Media, just before we have discussed the problem with the media, the fourth pillar of the constitution of the democracy, but they are also, internal corruption you can talk about. The good thing that the media can do is they can pressurize the government administrative structures and can get the law done properly. But media also, because of this unethical journalism or yellow journalism, this blackmailing and paid news, sensationalism, all these are some issues. Okay, then legal mechanism. What is the main problem with respect to the legal mechanism? The conviction rates are so low, the rules and laws are so biased for the towards the accused. Okay, so that is the reason why corrupt practices are not coming under control. So this is how you can answer the first part. Second part, what are the measures that you can give? So suggest more effective strategy. So code of ethics, that is something which you can write everywhere. Code of ethics and code of conduct. And then proper value education in schools. Okay, so maybe citizen report cards, you can say. So some innovative measures, properly, prevention of corruption act, strict implementation, Lokpal, Binami Act, and everything has to be done properly. And then you can also talk about office. Everything has to be transparent. Maybe some CCTV cameras and everything has to be installed in the office so that the chances of corruption will be less. And then citizen charter also you can talk about, that we have discussed. Okay, this is related to the international level ethics, right? At the international level, bilateral relations between most nations are governed on the policy of promoting one's own national interest without any regard for the interest of other nations. So here, see, it is like between, we discuss about two individuals, A and B. Similarly, now we are discussing about two countries, A and B. So most nations, they follow their own national interest rather than others. This lead to conflicts and tension between the nations. How can ethical consideration help resolve such tensions? Discuss some examples. Okay, so rather than going for mutual benefit, right? The rather than going with this Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam or universal brotherhood concept, so the point here is everybody is selfish, right? High level of individualism and vested interest. That is what you can see here. For example, you can see China is completely competing with India and challenging the sovereignty of the country also many times. So these are examples which you can write. You can also talk about US, their intervention in West. Okay, so the neocolonialism, new type of colonialism, the dependency culture that the West is creating on the developing and the underdeveloped countries, all these issues related to climate change. common but differentiated responsibility, everything. These are the points which you can discuss. So what should be the ethical consideration? Mainly promoting the universal brotherhood and utilitarian principle, maximum good for maximum people. So that has to be followed by every country, and between the countries there has to be proper cooperation rather than competition. So it should be based on the principles of mutual benefit rather than mutual repulsion. Many times you have discussed this. Public servants are likely to confront with the issues of conflict of interest. Now, today also we have discussed this. What do you understand by the term conflict of interest? See, what do you mean by this term conflict of interest? It is basically, any, there will be a primary interest and there will be a secondary interest. Like you are the head of an organization and your primary interest may be with respect to some act which you are going to do for the company, but the secondary interest may be affecting you or your family. If you remember, one of the case study that I have discussed, A is the civil servant and have to sign some contract with a company B, but his son or daughter is supposed to apply or join in this company B. Do you remember? So here the primary interest is this deal, but the secondary interest is this. So in this situation, what will happen? This is what the conflict of interest. So the primary interest may be influenced by the secondary interest if there is any personal commitment or personal interest is there. Okay, so in simple language I can say the public interest may be influenced by the private interest. That situation is what you can explain as conflict of interest. And how does it manifest in decision making of public servant? You can give that example. If faced with the conflict of interest situation, how would you resolve it? So conflict of interest is mainly this personal interest versus public interest, right? Then also, if you remember yesterday when we have discussed that case study, that river issue, right? Your organization versus larger public. So whether you have to protect the interest of the organization or you have to go for the public, that hazardous waste is actually discharged to the river. Yesterday we have discussed about that case study, so I hope you can remember that. So that you can, that is one example that you can write, public versus private interest. Yeah, so this is how you can see the conflict of interest. Now the question is, how can you resolve it? Proper code of conduct and code of ethics and the procedures and everything has to be there, and you have to listen to your conscience. You have to follow the conscience so that there won't be any cognitive dissonance, and you will go with the approach of maximum good for maximum people, and you have to follow whatever is legal. So these are things which you can explain. Case studies we'll discuss tomorrow, the second part. Okay, see, the thing is, I'm expecting that you're getting confident with the theory part. Nothing is going to be difficult for you in the exam. So in the theory part, you should be in a position to get at least 70 out of 120 or 130, whatever it is. So that should be the idea. Okay, guys, so we'll stop here for today. We'll see you tomorrow with the section B.